All right, what's going on, everybody? I'm back here again doing a um, book review on the forwards of the Woke Church book written by Dr. Eric Mason. Again, Woke Church, it says, is an urgent call for Christians in America to confront racism and injustice. Forwards by John M. Perkins and Ligon Duncan. So, in my last video, I recorded a session on John Perkins' forward of the book, and that's actually in two parts. Unfortunately, a phone call came in and shut off my recording. So the first forward review is two videos. Okay, so I apologize for that. But this one will be one video, and I'll make this one a little shorter. Try to get to the point quicker here. So this forward is by Ligon Duncan. Okay, and there's so much more to say here than the first one, but we'll try to make it as brief as possible here. So Ligon Duncan is I think he is the president, if I'm not mistaken, of RTS, Reformed Theological Seminary. I believe so. But let me look at the first line, because when I read the first sentence of Ligon Duncan's forward, I put the old classic LOL and circled it here, which is the laugh out loud, wordage. So this is what he says here. He says, "I am about the least woke person you could meet." I just said, Lord, I just said to myself, oh boy, here we go. Ligon Duncan has been captured by the philosophy of the woke movement, and he's starting off here by saying, listen, I'm just, good old white guy, and I'm just not woke, I'm not woke enough, and I'll give you some examples of what that means. I'm just not woke. Okay, so he goes on to say, gives us his experience. I've spent much of my life in a haze of relative cluelessness about the culpable indifference in many of the concerns that are addressed in this book. So I've been ignorant to many of the things that are addressed in this book. Okay, so being woke, which we'll get into with Eric Mason's first chapter, being woke is being conscious of what's written in this book and embracing it as a reality. Okay, so that's what woke is. We'll go into more detail later about that, but he says, for instance, having grown up in South Carolina during the Civil Rights era, when I came to Jackson, Mississippi at the age of 29 to teach systematic theology at Reformed Theological Seminary in the summer of 1990, the very first course I was asked to teach was, quote, pastoral and social ethics. Now, 1990, Jackson, Mississippi, young Ligon Duncan is given the opportunity to teach pastoral and social ethics. Okay? He goes on to say, now which you may ask, social issues, it says, now which you may ask, social issues did I choose to address in the course? Abortion? Check. Homosexuality? Check. Marriage? Check. Divorce and remarriage? Check. Medical ethics, such as infertility, end of life issues, etc.? Check. Just war? Check. Death penalty? Check. But what about racism? No. It did not even occur to me that this was a pastoral issue that I needed to prepare future ministers future ministries to address biblically in the church, much less in the communities where they would serve. Okay, sorry for maybe not reading that as clearly, but maybe this will just be something to help encourage you get the book, or at least familiarize yourself with this concept as I'm explaining it. But so Ligon Duncan is teaching a course on pastoral and social ethics. He's one of the things that stood out to me is the topics that he chose to teach on were actually biblical topics, right? So you got to understand, racism is a socially constructed concept, okay? Nowhere in the Bible does it talk about race. It talks about this idea of ethnicities, right? So we all come from one race. We are all one race. We're part of the human race, and Adam is our in not being a Christian. If you're not a Christian, Adam is your federal head. In other words, Adam represents you. You are a child of the devil, child of Adam. Okay, now if you're a Christian, Christ is your federal head, and now you are a child of God. Okay, and so when we talk about racism, racism is not a biblical terminology. Okay, there's not many races. There's many ethnicities, but there's one race. Okay. But notice with these topics that he's talking about: abortion, homosexuality, marriage, divorce, remarriage, even this idea of infertility and end of life issues, just war, death penalty. These are all biblical. Right? You can go to the Word of God and see where these issues are addressed from the Word of God. Okay. But then he says, what about racism? It didn't even occur to me that this was a pastoral issue. Okay, so I want you to also hear this white guilt that Ligon Duncan is promoting here. I just didn't see it. I missed it as a white guy who was never woke enough. I missed it. I wasn't preparing people for the ministry because I didn't talk about race. No, you're preparing ministers for the ministry when you give them the tools they need to rightly interpret the scriptures. Right? When you give them the tools they need to rightly divide the word of truth, you are equipping them for the ministry. I was talking to a buddy of mine about this section. How much time does a professor have in a course to cover the amount of work that's in front of him? For example, you maybe have, let's say you have 8 to 10 weeks to cover, topics. There's about 6 or 7, was it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You got about 9 topics here before you get to the 10th, which is racism, and you have a certain amount of time to cover each topic. And there are some topics that are more precedent than others. And there are other topics that you can add to this in the area of social ethics. So the point is that what this kind of education does is prepare you how to study, prepare you how to think critically, prepare you how to engage with ideas. This isn't, we're going to touch on every single topic and every single philosophy and every single thought process. And then where does it end, right? Because if you're going to talk about what aspect of racism are you going to talk about? Are you going to talk about racism within ethnicities, right? Are you going to talk about how Dominicans and Puerto Ricans don't get along? Are you going to talk about how Asians how Japanese people don't like being called Chinese. Are you or are you going to deal with the white and black issue, or are you going to deal with the black on black issue? See, where does this end? Where does this end? And if we're gonna and if we're going to and then what about, well, no, we're going to deal with white and people of color. But what people of color entail is just black, right? Because the greatest form of racial angst that we've seen in American history happened with the chattel slavery, right? And so my point is that this white guilt here is unnecessary, it's unhelpful, it's not fruitful, and you can't think in these ways when you're giving people an education, right? You can't go there. You can't do this. This isn't helpful. Now, if you want to have small groups, if you want to write a paper about racism, and how it affects and how it's been historically, how racism has historically affected churches and so on and so forth, that's fine. But this guilt of him not covering, the topic, is something that has never left him. And I wrote here in the margins, I said, well, the other thing is, if you're preaching through the Bible, for example, as a pastor, these themes are going to arise, right? So these topics of showing partiality to one person because of the ethnicity that they have is going to arise, and so you address it from the text. Okay, let me try to move a little quicker here because there's so much. Yeah. Oh, I have to read. You know what? Okay. I'm sorry. I'm gonna skip that part. I want to deal with that part, but I'm not because I want to end this video in a moment. Let me just deal with one more thing here, because I thought this right here, I thought this was hilarious. Absolutely hilarious, okay? So this is page 17. Again, we're just looking at the forwards, okay? Page 17. And this is what Dr. Duncan says, okay? All right, let me see where I'm going to start at. Okay. I'm going to just start here. Okay. This is what Ligon Duncan says. He says, there are many people out there today speaking to the issues addressed in this book, but they are doing so in unbiblical, uninformed, and unwise ways. And I just find that so funny. And it's ambiguous. There's so much in that statement, okay? Because